In another sense, life today is often a lonely experience based on fear of the future, which is magnified by disaster mentality and growing uncertainty each time a person is replaced by a machine, discarded because someone in power perceives they can make more money without them, and cast adrift to fend for themselves so a corporation can save money on medical insurance, sick leave, maternity leave, paid vacations, and retirement pension. We made ourselves into commodities, resources. Now in the old days, Old English resource, think about it, a source in re. You use something and you were the source of its renewal. That's what resource means. But if you look up in the dictionary today, resource is the way a nation garners its wealth. We become commodities. How does it feel to be a human resource that can be bought, sold, and discarded? That's what's happening all the time. Thousands of people are suddenly out of work so that the corporation's bottom line on the stock market can come up a couple of points. We outsource. If I want to solve a problem with my computer, I'm talking Bombay, India, or Calcutta. Now this is an interesting thing. The outsourcing is for the wrong reason, I think. It's to do away with people's jobs and to do things cheaper. But there's also a positive side to it that most people don't think about. The West has held the world's wealth. Outsourcing is beginning to balance that wealth by sending some of it to countries that have not been industrialized and have not had the same amount of economic capital and therefore the opportunities advised that we've had. When I was working in Nepal, women were breaking up rocks for roads with the equivalent of $1.50 a day. What's fair about that? What's fair about people starving while we get fat? Fairness is something that's happening for the wrong reason, but it is still beginning to spread the wealth around the world. I find that hopeful. I think we need to change the reason we do it, though, and do it honestly, compassionately, and for the right reason. Then everyone wins. Cooperation and coordination, when coupled with sharing and caring, precludes the perceived notion to compete, except in play and perhaps storytelling. People like the Kalahari Bushmen worked about 19 hours a week for food. No one was expected to work over 40. No one worked until they were over 20. The rest of the time they socialized, told stories, and played games. And this wasn't just the Kalahari Bushmen, it was also the Indigenous Americans, the Canadians, almost every Indigenous people, and the Australian Aborigines had the leisure to live a social life that they enjoyed, but they weren't owned by all of their possessions. Today, virtually every Western industrialized society is based on competition, to the point that it's exceedingly difficult to get people to cooperate, even for their own long-term good and that of their children, because competition born out of self-interest breeds distrust of another's motives, and distrust rules today. Now, there's an interesting thing about competition. When Katrina struck in the U.S., everybody got together and helped. When there's a disaster, the Red Cross is mobilized, the military is mobilized, everybody pitches in. But as soon as that's over, and there's abundance, that's when competition comes in. It isn't poverty that creates competition, it's abundance that creates competition. And it's spiritual bankruptcy. When I was working in Egypt, I, for some reason, poured a little water from my canteen down a cistern well and watched it soak into the ground. And I realized at the time that no well can ever be filled from the top. You can't pour enough water in it. It has to be filled from the bottom. A spiritually empty person, someone who is empty inside, cannot fill up with materialism. You have to fill up internally. And then all of a sudden you find contentment and you know when enough is enough. We're not taught that in our culture. But the indigenous cultures I've worked with do teach about enoughness. They do know when they have enough. And their life is not religious, it's spiritual. And spiritual in this sense simply means they're connecting to the earth. And they're seeing something that's greater than they are, and they think of it as a living organism of which they are a part.